The country is waiting on President Cyril Ramaphosa to announce his new cabinet. The political executive of the sixth administration ceased to exist on Wednesday last week when Ramaphosa took his oath of office at his inauguration in Pretoria. Currently, South Africa has been without a cabinet since then. The establishment of a government of national unity so far consists of 10 political parties. We are now joined virtually by the Professor of Politics and International Relations at the University of Johannesburg, Professor Siphamandla Zondi. And it's a pleasure to have him. Prof, thanks very much for being with us.
Good morning, Joanne, and good morning to the viewers as well.
So, Prof, currently, South Africa, we're sitting without a cabinet. We know this since last week, Wednesday, when President Ramaphosa took his oath of office. What is the time frame? Is there even a time frame for when the president must appoint a new cabinet? So, are there deadlines in terms of this?
I think there is no deadline constitutionally, but there is precedent. The last time President Ramaphosa had to appoint a cabinet and he had to balance dynamics within the ANC, it took him about 4 days. I think he announced it on the 4th day after the inauguration. We are on the 4th day now, almost going to the 5th day. So we should expect that now that he's now negotiating with partners who have to constitute a government, who are not just being invited to a government constituted by one party, then there is a little bit more consultation to make. There are 10 parties, so he had to consult with 9 parties as he constitutes this government. So it is to be expected that it was going to take a little longer, given that one of the parties only joined about 2 days ago. So it also now has to be consulted. And this consultation may not just be one way, all the way. There must be a bit of back and forth that is taking place. Ramaphosa must be very, very, very busy in the past 3-4 days.
Yeah, it certainly must be, because, I mean, if you think about what happened yesterday, we saw in terms of Gauteng that the Premier Panyaza Lesufi was about to make a meeting. Within an hour of it happening, it's been postponed, and that's indefinitely. It wasn't by a few hours, it was postponed, full stop. Is this a sign that these talks are very robust, to say the least, and that there are massive sticking points behind the scenes?
Yes, there's been signaling for now a couple of days. You remember, just after the elections, they've been signaling about by parties indicating that they won't just go in there to decorate the government and kind of add numbers in and stuff. They want some substantive positions that they would not. They would have to bargain for what they have. Remember the PA saying if they don't get Home Affairs or police or something that they understand, they will not accept arts and culture or anything of that nature. You remember that Helen Zille has been signaling quite several times, even as soon as yesterday, about the need to understand that this is a coalition of equal partners, which then is to say we will have a say about what we accept or what we do not accept. So which means that for once we have a situation where parties might not accept what the president offers, but because he's under burden to make sure that he puts together this government and that it has a chance of lasting, and that there's sufficient consensus as it does so, not sufficient consensus as defined in that framework, but just generally adequate consensus in order to constitute this. He now has to wait a little longer until he's able to form it properly. Yeah. Fortunately, the government continues to function. It doesn't really need ministers a day to do to function. It just needs annual performance plans. It just needs 3-year strategic plans, and director generals and administration are able to get it going. So it can wait for as long as it takes for it to gel nicely and every party to be happy. Because one thing you don't want is to have a disagreement or a party saying, I don't accept what has been given to me. And then you constitute an income.
Let's look deeper into what's happening at the moment between, and one would imagine the loudest voices right now are from the DA and the negotiation within this government of national unity. Yesterday in reports we were seeing that the DA are demanding that position of deputy president. That's what they have their eyes set on, is what we're hearing from reports saying that he wants to. Before, it didn't seem that there was a problem with Paul Mashatile being still the deputy president of the country, but it now looks like they want that position, along with 10 ministries that they want to be overseeing, whether in a full capacity or in a deputy capacity. And these are vital cabinet ministries that they are looking at. So, I mean, do they have a strong hand here, or are we seeing that that those are becoming a little bit nervous, saying, no, those are too powerful, we don't want you having those?
Oh, yes. Depending on what the size of the cabinet is, it seems to me that the DA would feel entitled to a 20% of it. Now, the 20% of, say, 30 cabinet ministers' cabinet would be about 6-7 ministries. They had in the past indicated that they're not necessarily demanding a deputy presidency, but they're not saying they're not demanding the deputy presidency. So it's very, very likely that the DA will want to have substantial presence in this cabinet, equal or equivalent to the amount of seats that it brings into this government, or the percentage it brings into this government, which is about 21% of the national vote that it has, and the ANC almost doubled that. So if the ANC is getting 15, they might be looking for 7 or something of that nature. Yeah, so we should expect that, but at the same time, the other parties must be accommodated. The DA principle for a while was to constitute a government on the basis that the parties must have, they must move from a particular threshold, I think it's 1% up, but now we have parties that have joined, several of them that have below 1% in government. I don't know whether they will be debating that, because they say that was to plant a seed of instability when you have only minus 1% parties that are in there. And then if I could give you a picture, we saw the other day that if you take the ANC, DA, and IFP out, and you look at the 6 other parties, they constitute almost less than 2% together. So that might be a challenge that might be negotiated. But I think the other obligation now to accommodate every party must get something.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any party that accepts not having a cabinet position.
Indeed, and that's where I want to ask you. You know, we see more and more parties, as of, the latest was El Jamaha, to join this government of national unity along with Raisam Zanzi. But the reality is that I want to hear from you. Where is the advantage of having more and more parties? Because now we're sitting at 70% of the National Assembly that are part of the government of national unity. Who is benefiting more here? Because would one look at it and say that the more that the little parties, the smaller parties that do come in, the less we will actually see being given to the ANC or to the DA? How does this actually work now? Because obviously those parties that are joining have been promised something.
They could be scientific about it, and if you think about it, one could be to first work out what is the percentage of each party, the percentage that each party brings into this government, and then work out what is the number. If the cabinet size is 25 or 26, it's supposed to be smaller according to the agreements. And then what is, if say the ANC constitute 50% or 49%, 48% of the current members of the GNU, then it gets 49% of the 26, and that might be 12. and then work out what is the percentage for the DA, and then work out the number of seats on that basis. And on that basis, you might not have conflict, but everybody there is a logical reason why everybody gets what it gets, because otherwise it is seen as an arbitrary imposition by the biggest party on others, which the other parties are at liberty to reject. One of the worst things here is that they have signed a statement of intent, which means they can exit at any point. They can exit even before it starts, because these agreements are binding, but they are bound by moral obligation and the need to act with integrity. And such conditions are never really binding, because they must be willingly abided with, and there is no other enforcement mechanism.
Yeah, and that's where the worry comes in, because then we have this they in they out kind of look. And now that you set up this cabinet, and somebody decides to pull up, then pull out, you have to rejiggle these, and these affect provinces as well. And we saw that playing out with what happened in Gauteng. I mean, you've got the Premier, and those are the two provinces, KZN and Gauteng, that certainly, if the DA decide to move away from all of this, those are also going to be a very different looking scenario. So in a way, there has to be something that ensures that all parties here are happy. Is this perhaps one of the biggest moments of President Cyril Ramaphosa's presidency here? I mean, how much space does he actually have to do things without pressure?
He will need all the courage and all the strength and all the diplomatic ability, the negotiation ability that he showed. He showed some 30 years ago, almost 30 years ago, when they were negotiating the transition from apartheid to a new democracy. And he will need that and a lot more. But he will need his team around him to help him very strong to constitute what must satisfy every one of those parties. Parties run elections in order to win something, and they get into coalition government of any form, including the GNU, as a form of coalition government with expectations, and those expectations are usually placed on the table and have to be responded to. So President Ramaphosa has a huge responsibility on his shoulders to make or break this, to make this last long, or to make this wobbly and unsustainable. The least thing we could do as bigger parties is to be arrogant and look down upon small parties when we cannot function without them. And of course, I admit that the ANC and the DA together alone can run everything. This thing is called government professionalism because they have willingly allowed that other parties can join, but the two of them can run everything. But it seems that there's kind of a bit of bad blood between them. They don't want to run on their own. And I guess that's the reason why we have a GNU, dilute this power, get other parties in the hope that we could help manage the ANC-DA dynamics, mistrust between them.
Yeah.
Short of that, they will have to work very hard to build the trust that is necessary for any institution to function cohesively. They have to be trust. We don't want to have these parties checkmating each other inside cabinet, and it could render it moribund, and it could make it very difficult to govern effectively. But let add to this that this government has been put up this way has to perform, because now the South African voter is now voting parties on the basis of whether they perform.
Indeed.
Now has to perform, but it's up this way. It's going to be a difficult one. And somebody must take credit if it performs, and somebody must take a fall if it is working.
And that's what I wanted to just, as we close up, we've got about a minute left now. I mean, that's the reality. Anybody that joins the government of national unity now, and let's just take the DA, for instance, because they're now meant to be working side by side with the ANC and all the other parties. And their reputation is also on the line here, because it was easy for them to point fingers and say, yeah, but it's them. not anymore. It's now us. So there's a lot riding on these positions. And I just want to ask you, how important is that deputy presidency position, and also the talk of the minister in the presidency position, because that could also be a factor in this, where perhaps we see John Steenhuisen going. Previously, those positions obviously held by the deputy of the ANC. You know, the president really was the be-all and end-all. Would it be very different in this case?
Oh yes, definitely. The Deputy President is the leader of government business, is the link between the executive and parliament. A very important role, very critical role for coordination of government. I guess the DA would want to do that because it now did not demand the speaker position. The two positions are equivalent in terms of power and weight. And then the minister in the presidency, it's a very untidy area because it can be constituted in any way. There is no standard minister in the presidency with an obligatory role that is there. If the president who decides that the minister of presidency is responsible for men and women, or is responsible for arts and culture, it can be anything. But I think that the AU would be, if it takes that position, would want one who is responsible for monitoring, for planning, monitoring, and evaluation. That's going to be responsible for how the entire government works.
Indeed.
And has access to every portfolio and is able to pass judgment on who is moving and not moving.
Indeed.
And therefore, it might be that the latter version might be a good compensation for not having a deputy president. Of course, the president can appoint two deputy presidents or more.
Okay, Prof, we'll need to leave it there for now, but thank you so much for giving us your views on this. Professor Siphamandla Zondi, Professor of Politics and International Relations at the University of Johannesburg.